So friends, in the session 1, we discussed about the meaning of inflation, the measurement of inflation, different types of inflation, the difference between the wholesale price index and the consumer price index. In continuation of that, let us see some more indicators as far as consumer price index is concerned. So this consumer price index or CPI, it has been calculated for certain segment of people also. For example, agricultural laborer, industrial worker, rural laborer, etc. Right? So there are three primary categories of CPI industrial worker, CPI agricultural laborer, and CPI rural laborer. Right? So this is the old series. This is the old series. This is the old series. In the new series, we have CPI rural, CPI urban, and CPI combined. So now question arises, sir, does introduction of new series means that old series is withdrawn? No, the old series is still existing. So in the old series, the consumer price index is calculated for a segment of population wherever they are located. In new series, it is calculated based upon a particular area. For example, rural area, urban area, and this is a combined of rural and urban. Now, for you, there are certain facts which you need to know. First of all, what is the base year? So the base year for industrial worker is 2001, for agricultural laborer is 1986-87, for rural laborer is 1986-87. For WPI, we have already seen the base year is 2011 and 12. And for new series CPI, the base year is 2012. So this is the one thing that you should know. Another aspect is that what is the frequency? So frequency in all the cases is monthly. So all the inflation index, they are given on a monthly basis. Now, next question is that who or which agency brings these index? So these three indexes, they are given by Labor Bureau, that is under the Ministry of Labor and Employment, right? So Labor Bureau gives these three indexes. So you can identify that this is for the workers, this is for the laborers, this is also for the laborers. So all of them are under the Ministry of Labor, and Labor Bureau is the responsible agency. This WPI, this is given by Office of Economic Advisor, Office of Economic Advisor, and this comes under the Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, and this is also called as DPIIT, Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, which is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Right? So ultimately WPI is given by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And if we see, these wholesale transactions are done by the commercial enterprises and by the industry. So it is very natural that it will come under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. This CPI combined and CPI rural and urban, they are given by the National Statistics Office. So earlier this was called CSO, Central Statistical Office. Now this is called NSO, National Statistical Office, and this is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So it is very clear that these are the major indicators, and For us, what is important is the base year, frequency, and which agency is giving these figures. So this is what is required from the examination perspective. Everything else is not important. This index is no longer in use, so don't get confused. Now this is the table which I have picked from the economic survey, right? So in the economic survey, again, all this data is not relevant. Don't waste your energy and time. What is important is the source of this data. So source for the WPI is Office of Economic Advisor, Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade under the Ministry of Commerce. For the CPIC, this is National Statistics Office. For the CPI IW, AL and RDL, this is Labor Bureau, right? So these are the agencies. In the last page, I already discussed the names of these agencies. Here, I am just indicating that in the economic survey, it has been given clearly. And in the examination hall, there are high chances that one question may be asked from this area. Now there is one more concept, that is headline inflation versus the core inflation, right? So if we see the total number of commodities, so there are primarily two types of commodities. One is which are having volatile nature, and another is which are having stable nature, and this is with respect to the prices. With respect to the prices, right? So those commodities whose prices are volatile, can you give some example? So example include petroleum products, vegetables, food grains, right, etc. And overall we can classify all of them into the food items and energy items. So the food items and energy items are those items which are having the volatile prices, stable nature with respect to prices. So all the other items which include manufactured items, right, etc. So those items are basically having stable prices. Now when we calculate the inflation, then first of all we need to understand why we are calculating the inflation. What is the purpose of calculating of inflation? The purpose is so that we can make the policies in the short term and in the long term, right? So we need to track the fluctuation in prices so that we can determine whether the prices are increasing or decreasing, and whether this decrease or increase is for a short period, maybe for a couple of months, or it is for a long time, like it is for years and years. So accordingly we will be taking the steps. So if it is for a short period of time, we can manage the rise in price through increasing the import or stopping the export. And if it is for a long time, year and a year, in that case we might need to take long-term measures. For example, building the infrastructure, building the cold storage, building the roads in the rural areas, building the new power plants. So the long-term steps can be taken so that the overall productivity can be increased, supply of goods can be increased, and inflation can be controlled in the long term, right? The point I want to make is that whatever steps we take for controlling the inflation, they will be dependent upon the prevailing situation of inflation, right? So prevailing situation of inflation, we need to calculate that how much inflation is for the short term and how much inflation is for the long term. Now if we see these commodities, this volatile nature of commodities indicate that this inflation can be for a short period of time, right? This inflation can be for a short period of time, and the stable nature indicates that this inflation can be for a long period of time. If there is a inflation in the stable goods, non-volatile prices goods, manufactured goods, then it shows that there is a inflation for the long term. So long term steps need to be taken in this case. And when there is an inflation in these commodities, that means we need to take certain short-term steps. Now coming back to the headline and the core inflation. This headline inflation indicates the total inflation. Total inflation means the inflation in the volatile and non-volatile commodities, right? So it indicates the inflation both in the volatile and the non-volatile commodities. So this indicates the short-term inflation also, right? So it indicates the short-term impact because this is having the volatile commodities also, and it is more concerned with the retail consumers also because it is going to impact the retail consumers, the food items, the energy item. We have already seen that consumer price index is having more weightage of the food item. So if the food or the volatile prices are increasing, the prices of the volatile items are increasing, that is going to impact the consumer price index, CPI, right? So this headline inflation indicates the overall inflation. The overall inflation, or this is also called as the general inflation. So in the newspaper, you will find this inflation figure as the headline because this is the headline inflation. And this is covering both the volatile and non-volatile item. All the items are being covered. Now, what is a measurement or indicator? So measurement and indicator can be first in the form of WPI, and now even the CPI has been introduced as part of the headline inflation. So earlier only WPI was indicating the headline inflation. CPI was not indicating the headline inflation. Now both WPI and CPI both are taken as the headline inflation, right? What is the impact? What is the importance? So we can track the short-term impact, and we can track the impact on the retail consumers, and we can take the short-term as well as the long-term steps accordingly. Another is core inflation. The core inflation is basically the headline inflation reduced by or less the inflation contributed by volatile commodities such as food and energy products. So when we eliminate the impact of the food prices and energy prices, then this is called core inflation. And there is no exclusive measurement, but RBI calculates non-food manufacturing inflation index to measure this inflation. Non-food manufacturing inflation, right? And what is the purpose? It is primarily used to measure the long-term impact of inflation on the economy. It reflects the impact of inflation on the production of goods and services. So long-term impact is seen, and accordingly the long-term initiatives can be taken. I hope the difference between the headline inflation and the core inflation is now very much clear to you. Now let us see the trend in the economic survey, right? So economic survey has indicated three kinds of inflation. One is headline inflation, which is indicated in the black line. So you can see the black line is indicating certain kind of fluctuation, right? So you can see my hand and there are certain fluctuation. Another is food inflation. So food is basically volatile item. In the food, the green line is representing the food inflation. So you can see there is a huge fluctuation. You can see this is the peak and then it is coming down. This is the trough and then this is coming up. So you can see there is a extreme low, extreme low, extreme up, extreme up, extreme low, extreme up, extreme low. So this volatile item indicates the extreme prices on the lower side as well as the upper side. And third is the core inflation. So this color indicates the core inflation. You can see the core line is comparatively stable. It is very comparatively stable. It is stable as compared to the headline and the food inflation. Friends, you do not need to understand or remember the percentage of inflation. If you understand that food inflation is highly volatile, headline inflation is relatively less volatile, and the core inflation is relatively comparatively stable or non-volatile, then that is sufficient. So you need to understand that thing. That is more than sufficient. Now, this is the observation given by the economic survey. The global economy has been witnessing a steep decline in the inflation over the past 5 decades, right? So there is a decline, and this statement is based upon the observation done by the World Bank in 2019. Inflation has declined in almost all the countries around the world. So decline in inflation is a observable phenomenon across the country, across the borders. In India too, inflation witnessing moderation since 2014. So in India also, the inflation has been witnessing a moderation since 2014. The CPI inflation has increased from 3.7% in 1819 to 4.1%, and WPI inflation has decreased from 4.5 to 1.5. So the point is, CPI or retail inflation is high, and WPI or wholesale inflation is comparatively low. One thing we can conclude from these facts is that when the goods are moving from wholesale to the retail level, there are some addition of cost, right? So when the goods move from wholesale level to the retail level. Retail level means to the consumer level. When the goods are moving from wholesale level to the retail level, what type of cost can be levied? What type of cost can be incurred? The first type of cost can be the cost of transportation. Then these goods also need to be stored at both the places, so there will be storage costs here also and here also. Then this wholesaler will not be selling directly to the consumer. There will be some middleman, some tradesman. So this middleman will also charge some profit, right? And when all these transactions are happening, there will be some kind of brokerage by the middleman, and there will be some kind of taxes from the side of government, for example GST or other local taxes, right? So we will have transportation cost, storage cost, middleman margin, brokerage, taxes. That means if we see this phenomena that wholesale prices are low and retail prices are high, that means wholesale prices are low and retail prices are high, that means these costs are comparatively higher. That means that the taxes, storage cost, transportation cost, middleman cost, these costs are very, very high. Because of these costs, the prices are increasing from wholesale level to the consumer level. The wholesaler is getting very less prices and consumer has to pay very high prices, and the entire increase in cost is because of all these factors, right? And if we see why this cost is high, this cost is high because of high transportation cost. That means our infrastructure is poor. The quality of road needs to be improved. The quantity of road needs to be improved. Railway traffic needs to be improved. Storage cost, the cold storage needs to be improved. The godowns needs to be improved. Middleman profit, this needs to be reduced by availability of transparent pricing, by allowing the farmers to sell directly to the consumer. this taxes needs to be increased, to be decreased, and similarly the brokerage needs to be decreased. The point I want to make is that all these reforms have to be taken if we want to minimize the gap between the wholesale and the consumer level prices. So if the gap between the wholesale and the consumer level prices has to be decreased, the only way is to improve the infrastructure, to improve the marketing facility, to improve the storage facility, to rationalize the taxes, right? So this is how we can conclude, and all this discussion has been done in the economic survey itself, right? So this is the observation that I wanted to make. Now, there can be many reasons that could have contributed to the steep decline in inflation in the emerging market economies. So we discussed that the inflation is coming down, right? So what are the reasons for that? The first reason can be adoption of more resilient monetary and fiscal policy framework. Now governments are becoming more aware. They are implementing the policies which benefit the prices. Structural reforms of labor, right? So in India itself, we are coming up with the labor reforms in the form of 4 labor codes, right? We are coming up with the product market reforms, right? These product market reforms through Make in India. We are promoting certain industries, for example, food processing industry, textile industry, defense industry. Through that, we are improving the competition. And when there is a high competition, automatically the prices will come down. So if the same thing can be supplied by multiple suppliers, then suppliers will compete with each other to reduce the prices, right? And ultimately the consumer will benefit. Adoption of, so if we talk in the context of India, right? So in the first point we said adoption of more resilient monetary and fiscal policy framework. In the context of India, if we see this point, we have adopted monetary policy framework for the inflation targeting, right? So in India, we adopted inflation targeting framework since 5th of August 2016 for a period of 5 years ending on 31st of March 2021, right? So this inflation targeting framework says that there will be a nominal anchor, which is CPI, Consumer Price Index. This nominal anchor says that the inflation rate can be 4% plus minus 2%. That means the minimum 2% and maximum 6% is the tolerable limit as far as the inflation is concerned. And there is a monetary policy committee which has been constituted under the amended RBI Act. Under that monetary policy committee, this inflation targeting framework is adopted. And in this inflation targeting framework, if the rate of inflation goes below 2% or more than 6%, then monetary policy committee is answerable, and monetary policy committee is accountable to the Parliament of India. Now,